It's the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We're happy to have you on board once again. We have a guest along who you won't want to miss. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Good morning, Alain.
Good morning, everyone.
And we are happy to have with us Nat Beuse. Nat is the head of safety at Uber's Advanced Technologies Group, joining the company a couple of years ago after having been the Associate Administrator for Vehicle Safety Research at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, aka NHTSA. It means a great deal to have you with us, Nat. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So great to have you, Nat.
Thank you.
Nat, you've made some recent news at Uber with a pledge of more transparency when it comes to the release of safety information from your self-driving vehicles program. That move followed criticism from NHTSA, your former employer, involving the 2018 death in Arizona of Alain Herzberg, struck by an Uber self-driving vehicle. I know there's a lot, but tell us about the changes.
Yeah, it's a really good place to start, Fred. Thanks for having me on, and thanks, Dr. K. Always good to see you again.
Nice to have you. This is maybe the most serious and the most important one of these podcasts that we put on, because as you and I and everybody agrees, safety is a necessary condition in all of this. We all have to be safe, and we all have to cooperate to be safe. It helps everybody. This isn't something that we should be competing on, and we so appreciate you coming on. And go.
Yeah, and happy to share. So, yeah, I mean, I think probably what you're referring to was the National Transportation Safety Board, who came out with the recommendation to Uber last year after the Tempe crash. And while I know NTSB well, obviously from my former life,
Right, yeah.
did not have the pleasure for working over there, but Chairman Somwal has done a great job, and I really appreciate his leadership on all issues safety. I think maybe stepping a step back, one of the things we were doing is updating where we were from 2018. So in 2018, shortly after the Tempe crash, we had published our version of a voluntary safety self-assessment, or what we call the SAFE report. That was really in response to, NHTSA's call to all companies who are testing on public roads to disclose what they're doing on safety. And a lot has happened to our company in particular, a lot of changes we've implemented. And so this 2020 report that we put out really is an update of that. And it just happened to coincide after the NTSB recommendation. So let me jump right into kind of two things that are pretty important with this update. The first is really unpacking this thing that we launched last year called SMS. We've been on safety management system probably a little bit longer than last year, actually, really trying to put some organizational safety things in place for the company. And to me, this goes hand in hand with what we're doing on the engineering side, which is what we call the safety case. And so the safety case, and I'm sure that's something we want to talk about in a little bit, is our version of what Dr. K and I used to talk about sometimes, about what is safe enough and how do you actually prove that. You can get, three guys or gals or guys and gals, whomever, chatting about this, but it's very abstract when you say what is safe enough. And what we've done with the ability through the safety case is to actually unpack that into engineering artifacts that we believe if we can deliver that, we can actually make and support that ultimate claim that our vehicle is safe enough to be on public roads. The other thing we did with this update is provide a kind of a leap forward in what we're doing on our tech side. So, we're always putting new sensors in vehicles, new compute systems, new algorithms, et cetera. And so we felt a need to update the public on all of those things. And you're right to point out that it's really about transparency. I'm a big believer in transparency. I think transparency helps you become better as a company. I think it helps you understand what you're missing and to be humble. And so I think for us, we wanted to make sure that the public, government regulators, people like you folks had a more accurate representation of what actually we're testing on public roads versus where we were 2 years ago.
Coming on this program with us, Nat, in itself is is evidence of your transparency, the efforts there. Why is it important to have what you call that safety case framework and have it open sourced for peer review?
Yeah, I think because the industry is still trying to coalesce around several aspects of safety. So whether that be verification, whether that be metrics, whether that be things you put in the code to sort of watch the autonomy to make sure, it does the right thing all the time. And all of these things are necessary, but by themselves are not sufficient. And so for us, the safety case allows us to put all of those different pieces together in a way that we believe can help make both a logical approach, but an approach that you can substantiate. And so the reason why we open sourced it is because, we're not here to say that we know everything. There are lots of smart people in this space, as you folks know. And to us, we wanted to share. We wanted to share what we've been doing. We wanted to share to get feedback. And we wanted to share to make it better. And we've gotten lots of feedback. And even before we put it out to the public, we actually got internal feedback from peer reviewers that we actually paid to review it, who are experts in safety case. We didn't invent the term safety case, by the way. That's something that is in some other critical safety industries. Typically, after some rather tragic events, that they become something that companies are kind of forced to do. We're doing this on our own well before any sort of government mandate or any requirement from anybody to do it. We're doing it because we think this is what makes sense. And so by open sourcing it and making it available, then other companies can look at it and see, does it work for them? And we can continue to get feedback.
And the hope is that the others will do the same.
Right, of
Sure.
course. And I think to me, this is the only way to approach this, to have all the smart people get together and share the information. I mean, this is not something to compete on. This is something to share on. This helps everybody. And again, if these systems aren't perceived to be safe enough to be out there to deliver the mobility, the value, the reason why everybody's doing this, if it's not perceived to be safe, it's not going to happen. It's going to end up on a shelf. All the investors are going to lose all their money. I mean, and so it is so important to get together. And I think there, a lot of people, PAVE and some other groups have come together to focus on this. But again, it's really important. And it's important for the customer who's going to actually be using this, who's going to gain the benefit from all this technology, to also consider it to be safe enough. People got on airplanes and flew. Okay, even though we know every once in a while, I mean, most unfortunately, things tend to happen. But when things tend to happen, we'll fix them. We aren't going to hide them. We're going to fix them. We're going to, we're not also darn bright to never make a mistake. I mean, that's unattainable. So it's so good that you guys are doing that. And as we've discussed, and maybe you want to chime in a little bit briefly, it's not just the vehicles themselves can't crash. The whole environment of getting in, getting out of the vehicle, the interaction of the customer with these vehicles has to be all safe. Comments on all that?
Oh yeah, for sure. And to touch on maybe something that Fred was pointing out. So we were not doing this because we wanted to tell everybody how, we're so smart and everybody else is not. That's not the point at all, actually. Yeah. It's a little bit to the point that Dr. K just mentioned, is when we look at what does it take to make self-driving real. It's not just cool tech, but actually real and serve a purpose. You actually have to look at many different things. It's not just about, is the autonomy safe? You do have to look at what happens if the passenger gets in the car and opens the door, seat belts. All those things go hand in hand with making a safe self-driving vehicle that actually brings benefits. And so when we look at, what do we hope other companies will do? We hope they look at it. We hope they critique it. We've already seen some activity on the voluntary industry front. Dr. K, to your point, like whether it's PAVE, whether it's AVSC that we're a member of, whether it's SAE, whether it's UL, who actually has come out with a framework for safety cases for autonomy or for autonomous systems. We think those are all very, very good things that companies should be engaged on. I've been in this space for probably longer than I care to remember. And after two
Yeah,
plus,
we've been chatting about this stuff for a while, haven't we?
That's right. That's right. And after 2 decades in public service, you sort of see how things can be, and sometimes how you wish they would be. And for me, like, I see a great opportunity for this industry to do a lot of good things, kind of on their own, without having to have government come in and say, this is the way you must do it. So I'm really excited that 5 years ago, companies in general were, hey, we can do this on our own. We don't need any collaboration. And I think if you fast forward the tape now, you see a lot more collaboration. I mean, Dr. K, I forget how many people are in pay, but a lot of people. I mean, we're not one of them, but that doesn't mean we don't support it.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's a testament to how folks have realized how difficult the safety question really is.
So can the government help a little bit here? Because of course, we're based on an economy in which competition is key. It's fundamental to our whole economy, and one doesn't want to see collusion and all this sorts of things. So whenever one says, "Hey, we're going to get in there and work on this together," it implies a collusion. Does one need some special treatment here to do more, or do you think you're good enough to go here and you don't need any more protection on that end of it? Because in some things, I mean, before you get into a room to discuss anything, you have to have 15 lawyers in there doing bid to do da 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 da. I mean, come on, Any thoughts on all that, or what?
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to be for anything that supports the safe testing and deployment of self-driving vehicles. I mean, to us, that's key. I mean, for our particular path, we see a very clear way to get there without, let's say, intervention or support or anything like that. But we do believe there are ways that, whether it's federal, state, others can all support the safe deployment of the technology. For me personally, I think the approach that USDOT has taken with kind of providing companies, we'll call it breadcrumbs, of things you should think about, things you should look for, I think is a very, very helpful, especially given the multitude of players that are in this space. I mean, you have everything from a tech company like Uber and Uber ATG to Ford Motor Company to GM. I mean, it's a wide swath of folks who have different expertise that they're bringing to the table. And I think that's helpful when it's just sort of looking at all of that, and the government is looking at it, say, like, let's see how this all shakes out before we start writing a bunch of permanent rules that look like this, that, and the other thing. At the same token, there is a need for manufacturers to have certainty that need to build vehicles, and the lead time for those vehicles are quite long. So it's a different challenge than, let's say, we have at Uber ATG, and certainly our partners like Toyota and Volvo very much appreciate. So to me, I think we continue to make progress. There's always conversations going on the Hill, but I think the sort of the transparency approach and having companies do a lot more on their own is definitely a good way to go for right now.
Alain, you talk a lot about how crucial autonomy is, the ability to operate without a driver, to the business model of Uber and Lyft, for that matter. I don't know if you can talk, Nat, about the importance of that. Not that all drivers are going to disappear, but what's your perspective?
Yeah, no, of course the drivers, and I've always argued no driver is going to disappear. I mean, because the number of drivers that are being paid by either Uber or Lyft, or making money working with Uber and Lyft, is such a small number. One's always going to need that number of drivers for people who need mobility and need a driver, or can afford a driver, or can really afford a driver. The problem is to get from what is really a very small number, not to say anything bad about the size of your market so far, but it's less than 1% of the trips. Okay, there are all these other people that are out there driving for free. That's me. I drive myself for free. I chauffeur my kid around, and my wife, I chauffeur her around. I mean, come on, what the hell am I doing chauffeuring her around? I mean, it could be a driverless Uber vehicle doing it, although I kind of like chauffeuring her around. But if you look at all the trips, we're the ones that are doing the work and not getting paid. Okay, we're the ones that are, and we could be doing something else, or we could be better enjoying life, or in fact, all the people who for whatever reason can't do the driving, how are they getting around? And so therefore, this is the real market. So Uber, instead of serving 1% of the trips, why aren't they serving 10%, 30%? Hey, why not hell with it, 80%? I mean, you start serving 10% of the trips, one of those 10%, you're still going to need a driver. So no driver gets unemployed. In fact, you probably end up having more. Plus, you have to then maintain this fleet, do all this. Jobs are created. All this stuff that people say, fear that somehow this is going to ruin the job economy of drivers, whether be in the movement of people or in the movement of goods. Come on, this just makes it. This just makes this so much better that everybody now has more mobility, and people say, oh my goodness, more mobility, it's more VMT. No, it's more PMT. It's person miles traveled, not vehicle miles traveled. So we get to do it, with a couple people in the car instead of one person. All of a sudden, geez, the congestion disappears, and the people get the improvement in their quality of life. To me, that's the business case of this. And that's why we need to be this. And what we need to have is we need to have the gizmos and the computers and the megahertzes and the memories and all that, cameras and so on, to do this for us and to help us and improve our quality of life. So that's why we need to do it, but it needs to be done safely.
Right, but your
That's
point,
where Nat comes in. That's where Nat
your
comes
point
in. That's
was
so
also,
key.
Alan. Your point was, I think, economic survival. The need to be able to go driverless, really driverless, is so important to a company
Well,
like
I
Uber.
think it makes it for Uber. It allows them to offer mobility at a cheaper price and make money. Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
you just econ 0.0001, supply demand, I mean, it's kind of critical, and I think it's great. That's why we're doing this. We're doing this. At least that's why I'm involved in the driverless initiative, is because it's going to put more of a product out there in a way that people can afford it better, and allow those that are putting the product out there to properly reward those on Wall Street or whatever, and do that part of it. So it's win-win on both sides. I don't know, Nat, what do you think?
I'm
Yeah, I
going to
mean,
let you talk.
yeah, no, it's great because Dr.
Yeah.
K made a couple points, and I think it's part of what happens with technology in general, right? There's a lot of fear that sometimes gets into to the conversation, fear of the unknown, fear of like what ifs with actually no data to go behind it. And I think from our perspective, from ATG's perspective, right? Again, we're not in it to build cool tech. Anybody can build cool tech. If we want to do that, I guess we would have all stayed in, no offense to Dr. K, University land or something, right? But
Yeah,
this is
where we just sit there and play and throw stuff on shelves,
that's right.
I mean,
Right, but
whatever.
this is really
Yeah,
about transforming transportation and really bringing about transportation inequities that unfortunately have crept into society that we can actually change with this technology. It's certainly why I came to a company like Uber. It's not about replacing the drivers at all. It's the power of the network. It's a lot of what Dr. K talked about, which is, at some point you can only cover so much with drivers. And if you're going to try to cover everything with AVs, well, that's like level 5. And, we're probably some time away from that. But what we can do is have a very limited or small operational design domain, or let's call it a small network, that we can pair up with our driver partners. And what do you have some magic there when you do that, because then you can bring the technology forward a whole heck of a lot faster than if you tried to solve every single condition all over the place. Oh, and by the way, make it safe. It's
I
a
mean,
very difficult problem, but by pairing it up with our drivers, we can actually deploy it in a much faster and much safer way. And so to me, it's super exciting to kind of have both of those pieces working together in a system. So you actually get that system effect of bringing transportation options to a whole lot of people who right now don't have those. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, if you look at the way our transportation system is set up, it does at times create a haves versus a have-nots. and you have food
Not at
deserts.
times. It does create. I mean, it does.
Exactly.
I mean, we're being nice here saying that, but go ahead. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's right. And so this has an ability to change that, and we can do it in a safe way. On top of that.
Well, we have to do it in the safe way. Those folks deserve it to be done in the safe way,
Exactly.
of course,
Exactly.
without a doubt. And you make the point that I try to make all the time. We can do operational design domains that provide enormous mobility for people who have struggled, okay, who for whatever reason haven't had that opportunity. You certainly have done that with drivers. You've gone into communities and provided mobility. People needed to get crosstown. There's no crosstown bus, okay, but they needed to get there. They didn't have and you provided that. Now to be able to do that, and then do that not only with some drivers, but now also be able to do it driverless in the appropriate operational design domain to start. My goodness, you start doing that, guess what? It then becomes easy to grow. I think it becomes easy to grow that operational
Right.
design domain. Plus, all you're learning from doing that and interfacing with the people, and the people appreciate it. Guess what? It's arm in arm with the customer to go on and make it bigger. And that's why I think that's the way to grow this business.
Yeah,
At
and
least
I think
that's my view on it,
right, and I
and
think
your view too.
to touch on a point, that's kind of front and center right now with in a lot of the public's mind is around diversity. And when I think about diversity, it's all of diversity. It's not just race, color,
Yeah,
things like
sure.
that, but it's
Yeah.
also around just folks with disabilities. And so, for me, working with two world-class partners in Volvo and Toyota is a way to think about how do we actually have a vehicle that serves all of those purposes, meets all the federal regulations, of course, but actually really provides that benefit of true mobility for everyone, not
Yeah.
just a certain class of folks. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Well,
And
while we're on that topic, I mean, we've had, I don't know if you know Henry Greenwich. He's at NYU now, had been at GM Cruise on as a guest with us. And he's talked about the need not only to get the black and brown community involved in understanding this and planning where this technology is going, but getting the companies to hire
Mm-hmm.
people from those communities. So tell us, when you look around, obviously you're a great example, but when you look around, what do you see?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So to me, um, inclusiveness is what comes with building a great product. And I'm super proud to work at Uber and Uber ATG, where we really place a high emphasis on that. There are the typical challenges of, recruiting pipelines, certain geographical areas and things like that. But some of the things that we're doing is exactly when we're actually trying to pick where we might go. That's actually some things that we look at as the criteria or the sort of makeup of that particular area to understand, like, what exactly are we doing there, so we can make it be a conscious choice and not an unconscious choice. You hear this term unconscious bias kind of a lot. And so we want to be deliberate about where we're going and be very specific about why we're going to those areas. And so then on the recruiting front, it's for my team in particular, I'm very proud of the fact that we have a very diverse team from all over, because it's really important. What we're trying to do on the safety side is not trivial. And we've gone out and made sure we've had folks from aerospace, from nuclear, of course, from automotive, from tech, et cetera, to bring that inclusive approach to how we think about safety. If we just went and hired everybody that was in the auto industry or everybody in tech, my hunch is we wouldn't be nearly as thoughtful as we are on the safety front. And then that comes hand in hand when we look at gender and other diversity factors. Like, that's really important for me. Like, I want to have differences of opinions, different viewpoints, because again, that really drives how we think about what we're actually trying to do on the safety front, and that extends into the product side.
Well,
yeah, and
congratulations on doing
yeah,
that.
yeah. Congratulations, and as you know, as I've hinted to you, we're sort of working around here to try to get something started in Trenton, New Jersey. Why am I spending my time in Trenton and whatever and so on? It's because I think that's the right place to start. That's where there's an enormous amount of fundamental need of an enormous number of people who really don't have options. And, you come to Princeton and, how many cars do I have in the driveway? I mean, hey, yeah, like to take an Uber too, but,
Mm-hmm.
but,
Mm-hmm.
I can fend for myself. A lot of people are, have a lot of trouble fending, a lot of hurdles to meet, and this can really provide mobility. To me, that's where I'd like to start. That's where that, and certainly, you bring the diversity piece and all that stuff in here. This is an enormous opportunity to bring people together and provide a level playing field, as opposed to this tilted thing that we've ended up somehow falling into, because hey, the rich have all, and well, of course the rich have a hell of a lot, and poor are always in the tight. But this is an opportunity to really provide very efficient mobility, very good mobility at a very affordable price,
Right. Right.
without having to hand out and say, hey, give me a ton of money. Okay.
Right.
And so, and have to me, have everybody be happy. I mean, it almost seems to be too good to be true.
Right. Right. But like
That's,
Fred pointed out, I think one of the things that's, a challenge is sort of the stigma, let's say, that tech has about maybe not for us kind of thing. And what we've done locally, at least in Pittsburgh, is, whether it's hosting high school kids and exposing them to the tech, or trying to be visible in the neighborhood to show that we're there, hosting events, things like that. But really actually trying to establish better pipelines so that it becomes an option right up in the front, as opposed to something that you fall into, if that makes sense, right? Like, we want to be deliberate and then grow those pipelines, so that people see us as an option, not like, oh, well, I heard something about those guys, let me go check them out. It's like, front and center. And we think we obviously are doing a good job, but we also aren't satisfied with where we are, and we continue to work on this.
well, I think you mentioned kids. I think that's sort of the thing that I ended up tripping over in Trenton is how important the kids are. Because in fact, guess who's really not very mobile in a community? The kids.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's not, it's certainly the 13 to 17-year olds, if not the 10 to 17-year olds. And heck, if you're a 17-year-old and you don't have a car, you don't have the money to have a car, then it goes on in that whole group. I mean, what they have to be chauffeured by their parents or whatever, take a bus, or at least when I was that age, I could hitchhike, people don't do that. I mean, I think it's terrible. I mean, I went everywhere hitchhiking. I didn't have a car. I didn't have money. Okay. Now you can't even hitchhike. But now Uber is going to come in there, man, give you a ride, and boom, and it's going to be inexpensive, and you can go to soccer practice, you can go caddy someplace and carry bags, you can go to work at a shop wrong and bag groceries or whatever.
It's going to change everything,
just,
for sure.
it changes everything for that age group. And then you start talking about seniors, it's the same thing. And all of a sudden you take a look
Mm-hmm.
at those groups, my goodness, those I think end up being the best ambassadors. They end up embracing us, they end up protecting it, they end up cherishing it, they end up convincing their parents that this is a good thing. Okay. I mean, I don't know, it's just a thought out
Mm-hmm.
there. But again, the inclusiveness of the community that you get to serve, if you can get to a point in which it's really affordable. Unfortunately, to make it really affordable in large volumes, I think we have to get the automation to work, and
Mm-hmm.
of course be safe, which is your job. That's your shoulders has to carry that sucker, Nat.
That's right. That's right. I'm up for the challenge.
We're going to pull over to the curb for just a minute here, but this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more information, head to motoetf.com. On the website, we should point out, check out the white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Great information there that'll help you make informed decisions when it comes to investing. ETFs, you may know, are a good way to spread risk with investments and focus on a particular category. The site, once again, is motoetf.com. Nat.com. Nat, I wanted to ask you about the pandemic and the effects that might be having on what you're doing in terms of testing and keeping things going there with the program.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, Fred, because I think if you look at kind of some of the articles that were coming out, sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was like, oh my gosh, self-driving is gone. Everybody's going to go back to wherever they came from. And it's obviously no surprise the effect it's had on our rides and business. And I think you see in the paper the effect that it has on the Eats business, right? Both of those are good. But in self-driving, from an effect on what we've been doing on public roads, of course, there were some government things we had to follow, right? So, governors in different jurisdictions had issued different orders for what was essential and non-essential, all those kind of things. But and we had to follow those. So yeah, of course, for a period of time, our track was shut down. We were not on public roads, but we worked, with local officials and, state officials to get back on the road. So now we're back on the road. You might've seen we're actually in DC this week, mapping, getting ready. We're back on the road here in Pittsburgh with some new stuff. And so, it's exciting. But one of the interesting things that happened is it really opened up kind of a new area. And I would just say maybe even more so accelerated that area. So all the companies, generally speaking, are involved in simulation in one way, shape, or form. And one of the things that we were able to do was to really leverage some of the pipelines we were already building to kind of continue to build and evaluate our tech, but virtually. We were also able to do some unique things with even kind of hard vehicles that were sitting in the garage or sitting outside, to be able to basically spin them on and take some measurements, take some action without actually physically being there. And so it was a really cool time, because you saw all of this innovation happening, even people doing experiments in their garage, to actually be able to continue to work pretty effectively while we were not kind of physically in the office or physically at the track and things like that. It also opened up some new things we had to consider. We had to get much smarter, and we were able to leverage some of the expertise we had at the core business around what does one do about this sort of COVID thing. And so talk about partitions and face masks, and how do we protect upmost and foremost our drivers, our test drivers, our mission specialists, but also to Syntec still continue their safety mission. I think Dr. K knows me pretty well. I'm a pretty staunch advocate of making sure if we're making decisions on safety, that we're actually being true to those decisions. And so we have 2 mission specialists in the front seat. We wanted to make sure that whatever we were going to do for COVID, we maintained their safety goal and their safety responsibility. And proud to say we were able to do that through a number of different countermeasures and risk mitigations we have in place for COVID that still does allow them to do their very, very real job of controlling that vehicle, but at the same time reduce their risk of infecting each other. And there's all sorts of things I could talk about that we did around kind of the operation standpoint, teams and things like that to kind of limit interactions. But so far, everything is going great.
Yeah, I sort of argued sort of the same sort of thing. I think COVID, one has to look at the silver lining, maybe a little silver lining that's in it. It's sort of taken all the pressure of getting out there too fast off of, and allowing people to step back. One always goes through sort of version updates of things and so on. And if you have a bunch of stuff out there, it's tough to version update everything. But if everything's in simulation, it's easy. Oh my goodness, we can't be out there on the road, so let's go to the new version and whatever, or update all this stuff. So I'm sure you went through and accomplished that. And when you look at really a lot of the challenge here, a lot of the challenges is in the coding, is making sure that the code is working well. I mean, that's a non-trivial thing, but that's fundamental to the safety. Yeah.
But and I think one thing sometimes people say is or they'll ask me, how come you can't do everything in simulation then?
Oh.
and I think it misses the broader point that you actually need a couple tools to do this the right way.
Yeah.
You need simulation, because as Dr. K pointed out, that allows you to kind of rapidly innovate, make mistakes in a very kind of safe environment, right? You know, the only thing you're crashing is electrons, pixels, and but it's not sufficient, right? Even the best simulation in the world is not sufficient for a lot.
It's an
for a lot,
approximation of the real world.
yes,
I mean,
for a lot of reasons,
Mother
right?
Nature is out there like throwing these curveballs at you. You never
Exactly.
saw swung and missed at that one. Whoops.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. But it allows you some kind of great things you can do on the technology front.
Yeah.
And then you need the test track. So the test track, you can do some more things, a little bit more real, but then there are even some things that you wouldn't necessarily see or do on a test track. And then you need the on-road piece, right? And the whole concept, and for ATG in particular, is like kind of having this gated flow from kind of inception of software till it gets out on the road. You know, a lot of people would say like, oh, you just, rogue software on the road and there's no testing protocols, et cetera. And that's, for our case, that's not true at all. There's a very rigorous process that any piece of code has to go through before it lands on public roads. And then even there, we have 2 mission specialists who are responsible for making sure that it's operating like it's supposed to. But certainly COVID, we couldn't do that last 2 pieces for a little while. And so we spent a lot of time on the first piece. But now that, as things have gotten better, we're kind of flexing all 3 of those tools at the same time. And so it really is like, they're sort of tools that you need to kind of do the job, as opposed to only needing the hammer, right? You need the hammer, you need the screwdriver.
Yeah.
You got to have all those things.
Terrific. Earlier this week, NHTSA launched its autonomous vehicle online tracking tool, a map that shows some of the places where vehicles are being tested on public roads. The map's a pilot program and now shows testing in 17 cities. And the agency says it's going to grow as companies submit more information. Any thoughts about the program?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Of course, I think you two know we are one of the companies that submitted our data and are providing data for that tool. I think it's a great way for companies to continue to be transparent about where they're testing and how they're testing and things like that. To me, I think it's just the beginning. I think NHTSA has said it'd like to see more companies go in there. To me, one of the interesting facets is you really had the company piece and the state piece all tied together in one tool. Before this, there was like, yeah, you could go somewhere and there'd be somebody might have the state piece and they might only have one state or whatever. And then somebody else might have what are the companies doing? Usually some newspaper person would put it all together and publish some article. And now it's like in a really interactive tool that allows you to sort of click in and zoom out and find different pieces of information. So I think it's a great start. Kudos to my former colleagues at NHTSA for kind of pulling it all together and pulling it off. And we'll see how it goes. I know there's some complaints that it's not detailed enough and it should be mandatory, et cetera. But I think it's one of those things, let's like kind of crawl a little bit before we start sprinting. And so I think we'll learn from this, of course. We'll learn like what data makes sense to put in there, what data doesn't make sense to put in there. But to me, it's a great start.
Alain, in the latest newsletter, you highlight Brookings is out with a report headlined "Autonomous Vehicles Could Improve Policing, Public Safety, and Much More."
Yeah, well, that's from our friend there, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these vehicles are going to be programmed to not break the rules or take the rules to where they should be. I mean, is the speed limit a speed limit or is it 9 over? Who knows? But somebody has to go out there and tell folks what that number is, and hey, it goes in the code and it doesn't violate it. The problem with the current system that we have is that people misbehave. That's what leads to all the difficulties, and that misbehavior, we don't want to again say, that's the way this stuff is sold to us. I mean, it's sold as a dream or something like that, and we can do donuts on our neighbor's lawn or who knows what, or climb as I like to say, the wall of China with it. come on, I'm trying to go get a haircut. I mean, cut it out. But so I mean, anyway, and the whole policing thing, if these are going to be the real laws that everybody has to sit there and obey, I mean, do we really need people with guns enforcing this thing? I mean, really? I mean, come on. Don't they have better things for those well-trained people to do than to pass out traffic tickets? And it can get so ugly so quickly. One's afraid to even mention it. I mean, you don't want to suggest that, this is another, way to stop and frisk, but is it? I don't know. Geez, somebody's speeding. Let me look it up. Oh my goodness, they have warrant out for their arrest because they didn't pay for their broken traffic lights in the town next door, and so let's go arrest them. And then they get, they're what's everybody attacking me for? And then they twitch and somebody. I mean, it gets so ugly so quickly that we should stop it in the beginning. I don't know. I mean, yikes.
Well, if the future is driverless,
well,
maybe
driverless
we have solutions here.
Yeah, well, there is some responsibility that should go to the car companies. Great. Volvo said we're going to limit the speed of the car at 100 and whatever miles an hour. Okay, where can I do 100 and whatever miles an hour in Jersey? Cut it out. Okay. And in fact, so many of these cars now have in it that they can read what the speed limit is. Okay. So why does my speedometer say 160 miles an hour? Well, because they used that to sell it to me so I could have, some vision of, but I shouldn't go out on New Jersey Turnpike or out on Cleveland Lane out here and do 160 miles an hour. Come on. And if they put this stuff in there, they know what I'm going to do. I'm going to clip it. I'm going to turn it off. And if NHTSA or somebody says they've got to put it in there, then they're not going to sell any. I'm going to go buy a 55 Chevy and do 90. I don't know. Could a 55, maybe a 55 Chevy could, I don't know. We don't want to go down. This is how we got to this, which is really a minor infraction. It's a parking violation. It's, okay, I rolled through a stop sign. And all the and why is there personal interaction that goes on? Why does a police person have to talk to me about, send me the damn ticket? But then I hate it. I think I got one of those tickets many years ago in Washington. Never paid it. I haven't been back to
there's
Washington.
a warrant. There's a warrant
in the car. I don't have that license anymore. They're going to come arrest me. Oh my goodness! They're going to shoot me. I don't know. I mean, if you sit back and you think about it, I don't know, 50% of the expense here in Princeton for the police force is to pass out traffic tickets or do traffic enforcement. Really?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. There's a missing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, there is a kind of a challenge here, which is when you look at the deaths on the nation's highways and serious injuries, like, you can always point to what I would call like the big three. It's like seatbelt, speeding, and alcohol. Yeah. And of course, we lose way too many people if you just were to pick on alcohol, for example. Yeah. And part of the challenge is that we haven't gotten any better on this issue as a country, right? Like, I think people have written things about how Uber and Lyft have helped out in that space, but from a self-driving perspective.
Helped out. We should point out you have helped out enormously, and in fact, you should be funded by the alcohol in the alcohol industry. Mm-hmm. I mean, the beer and wine industry should fund you. Why? Because and the restaurant should fund. Somebody's able to go to a restaurant and have an extra drink. because they can take Uber home.
Right.
Oh my goodness. I mean, enormous
Right,
value associated with that.
But part of what you were saying there, Alan, is like we see it now in testing, like where our test drivers are following the speed limit. They're stopping for their mandatory, depending on what jurisdiction, seconds at the stop sign, et cetera. And we notice very interesting behaviors by not the three of us, we'll call it the other people on the road.
Yeah.
And I think this will be one of the great challenges of deployment, which will be the integration of this tech with all the rest of us and whatever our perceived driving habits we think they ought to be or should be or whatever. And I think this is something that we all have to work towards to kind of make it the whole system better, because the whole system won't get better by itself, right? We all have to work towards it. So like we can't give up on traffic enforcement. Do we need to do some maybe reforms around that? For sure, you're spot on around that. But I think from if people are not obeying the speed limit, let's say, or the traffic signals, that actually makes it more difficult for our vehicle to be able to be safe, because now it has to consider other oddball behavior that makes solving this more challenging and more difficult.
I've termed it as we need truth in the traffic laws. Okay, is it a speed limit or isn't it? If it is, tell us what the hell it is.
Well, your programming says it is, right?
No. Because I sort of argue that the traffic laws have been written for human abeyance, and the recognition that in fact humans sort of like, la-di-da it a little bit and don't really toe the line. So they'll give you whatever more. Rolling through a stop sign, stopping and then going. I mean, why do you stop at a stop sign? The reason you have a stop at a stop sign is so you have time to look left and look right and make sure that it's safe. The objective there, the fundamental objective of a stop sign, is not to get you to stop, is to make sure that it's safe to proceed. So for a human to be sure to it's safe to proceed, we need to look here and then we need to look there, and that amount of time requires us to really come to a stop. If you have a vehicle that knows there's nobody coming, why should it stop? Come on, I want you to, why do you want me to stop? So we need to have a discussion here as to what is for what reason, for whom to obey to what level. Now that is, I don't know how in the hell we end up having that discussion. That's a tough discussion to have. Okay,
yeah.
It's
this will be part of the integration challenge for sure.
Yeah, it's part of the integration challenge. At some point, when I drive, I wouldn't say, oh man, that person's a lousy driver, and I make all these comments about that, and that's another human driving, because they're not driving the way I drive. There's a whole distribution of driving behaviors. Now we have a new entity in that distribution of driving behavior. We now have an automated vehicle. Damn it, that thing it's code. It's well spelled, boom, ba ba boom, ba ba boom. Okay. We should be kind of happy as humans. At least we know how that thing's going to behave. Therefore, we don't have to sit there and guess as to, where on the distribution. We know that vehicle's stopping. We know that sucker's going to do no more than 9 over or whatever the hell, people have given us, or maybe it's right on the speed limit and it's going to do it. And then, and of course, the OEMs come in here and, again, they now have the cameras that can read the speed limits. Okay, what do, they go and put it on heads-up displays. So not only can I see it here, I can see it in my face. That's not what you should do with it. Control the throttle and the brakes so that I behave properly, okay? But if that behavior is not what I want, then I'll drop the wire.
That's what Nat was talking about, the difficulties.
And then that's what makes us so darn challenging and difficult. Okay, and we have to recognize, I don't know how we do. We all get together and figure out how we figure this one out. This is non-simple, okay? But it's fundamental. And as you say, you know, you're out there behaving well, and all these other people are now, you know, unhappy with you, and they toot at you, and then they cut you off, and they whatever, and they think bad of Uber because they're following the rules, and you know the whole thing goes in. I don't know how we deal with that, okay? Except, you know, start behaving. I don't behave well.
orders from Dr. K.
Well, I would like to behave well, but you know, sometimes I misbehave.
Elsewhere in the newsletter, Alan, a couple of other quick headlines to touch on. Amazon has received approval from the FAA to begin limited testing of package deliveries using that fleet of drones that they talked about all those years ago.
Great. Again, I don't, you know, niche market as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, you know, moving one package from Robbinsville to my house and then taking it back and so on. I mean, I don't know. The swarms would be, I don't know, whatever. If it's to take it the last 50 feet from the vehicle to my porch, maybe. I don't know. I mean, for special applications in special places where there are no roads, where you can't get there, absolutely. Okay. But, you know, I look at it personally as a niche application. I mean, great. I love drones, but, you know, whatever.
When I see that, I think if Amazon's successful with it, why not Uber too?
Yeah, Uber might, you know, well, they have Uber Elevate, and they're trying to move people. Right. I don't know.
The air taxis.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, again, that's not quite the market I'm trying to address and get better. But whatever, let's not go there.
What's interesting about that, and not to kind of speculate on what we might be doing with Elevate or not, is just around that kind of just a whole safety approach, though. How you think about that problem space is actually not so different than how you think about the vehicle space. So should you have sort of an organizational approach to safety like we've implemented called SMS? Yeah, for sure, it makes sense. In fact, FAA actually mandates that for certain carriers. And then does it make sense that you try to unpack how you're going to keep this thing safe depending on what you're doing? Absolutely. I mean, Dr. K was mentioning before about, you know, whether it's kids or you know, whether it's, you know, packages or whatever the case may be, your safety case for that is actually going to be different. For autonomy, it might be mostly the same, but how you have to deal with, you know, things in the vehicle, people in the vehicle, et cetera, are going to be different. And that's why we like the safety case, because we can actually tailor it depending on what we're up to. So I think it's a great example of, like, yes, everybody thinks of drones and wide open space in the sky and it's so much easier. It's actually not. It's actually some of the same challenges we have to think through on verification and testing and all those kind of things.
If those things start dropping out of the sky, guess what? They aren't going to happen. They've got to, like these, they've got to be safe, and it takes the approach that you're making. It has to be throughout the company, and it's good to have them. It's good to collaborate with them on the safety piece. I'm just saying the market. I don't know. I think driverless vehicles have a really huge market. You know, drones, package delivery, yeah, whatever.
Dr. K is just saying he doesn't want to get his burritos and pizza airdropped on him.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to splatter all over. I'm going to, and technologically, I think they're fantastic. I can recall when I first saw them. I think that it's CeBIT in Hanover in maybe 2003 or something like that. Some guys and gals were out there in the open space playing with these things. I'm like, whoa. And, you know, and I was the first guy on my block to buy one. I ran into class and I flew one in class, you know, and did all that stuff. And University of Pennsylvania has done a lot of neat things and so on and so forth. I just, whatever. I'm trying to deal with a much, I think, well, never mind.
While we're up in the air, Alan, also from the newsletter, the airline industry is ditching change fees. American and Delta are saying they're eliminating fees for changing or canceling flights, and it's permanent. It's a permanent change. So
yeah, well, you know,
you talk about silver linings from the pandemic.
Oh man, that is probably the best. I mean, how many times was I $200 for me to go in there and change my ticket. I mean, to move a couple bits and bytes around. How profitable was that for them? And well, I know why they did it is because, I'd buy a round trip, leaving tomorrow, but coming back like 6 months from now where the cheap tickets are, and then of course I'm going to have that, and then I'll change it to, not a Saturday night over stay. And I was so happy when I saw that.
So it made the newsletter. And so did a story from Electric reporting that Tesla has released a time-lapse video of production at its Shanghai Gigafactory. Yeah. There are some humans in there, but look at those robotic arms putting cars together. Wow.
No. I mean, I think that's the way a lot of folks are working, except if you go to the McLaren facility in England, it's a little different thing. And it's all there. And I mean, you can eat off the floor, but I think you can eat off the floor there in Shanghai too. Of course, that's the way it's going. It's I mean,
the speed at which they can build them is
not only the speed at which they can build them. To me, I think the speed at which they can change models. Right. I've always looked at it as a flexibility thing. I mean, it used to be, in the 50s and 60s, you would have a different model every year. I mean, some would have fins all over the place, and then there's like chrome all over the place, and then there are big bumper, small bumper. Every year there'd be enormous change in the amount of time and effort that it would take for each of the manufacturing facilities to change. But now here, man, it's just a little bit of code to the doom. Then the robot do this, you have it but you did the boom.
And I know you were excited yesterday too, as we checked off another success for SpaceX.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God. I mean, come on.
Just seeing that happen over and over.
Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, a few days ago, when they went into a polar orbit launch out of the Cape, which means you have to fly over land, which means the FAA has to not give you permission to do this over land as opposed to water, which means that the probability that sucker is going to blow up and drop shrapnel on everybody's house is like zero. Before they would do that, and to reach a performance level and a safety level that would allow the FAA to do that, it's a little bit of what we're talking about, that, and so that you send it over that populated area in the launch, and then to bring the booster back over that population, land that sucker back at the Cape. Cut it out, man. They got that. Well, but that's a pretty easy environment. If you even with small winds and small variations, it's pretty much of a deterministic problem. You don't have Alain appearing all of a sudden in front of you when you absolutely least expect it. Okay, that is tough. Dealing with the driving in Trenton with whatever. Even if you have the sucker mapped down to the gnat's eyelash, it's non-trivial.
Definitely.
And so, we have work to do and so on. So yes, hats off to SpaceX. I claim their problem is a heck of a lot easier than the one that we're trying to do. But, but hats off to them. I mean,
you're saying it's not rocket science, it's tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to do rocket science, as many people know. One point thought I was going to Mars, but we didn't go there. That was a long time ago. Now maybe whatever.
Well, we want to remind people that the Princeton Smart Driving Car Summit virtual is still slated for next month, October 20th through the 22nd. You want to keep an eye on smartdrivingcar.com for the latest information there, right now.
Yeah. We're still trying to put it on. We're still trying to figure out exactly how it can be worthwhile to the various folks who want to get together and try to help move this technology forward. I think that's the objective. How can we best serve it? I think it was nice when we could bring everybody to Princeton. It certainly would be nice if we could do some demonstrations in Trenton. I think it's too soon to do any of those things. We were almost set to do things back in March, and of course, everything,
Yeah.
Everything changed. Yeah.
Everything changed, but we'll get back, and again, the silver lining, it's given us a chance to take a breath, make the things really work, as opposed to trying to go up against some constrained timelines. And in the end, I think we'll all benefit from this. I think it ends up being good. And again, it's all for the safety's sake. We can't be too early and not be safe. We've got to be safe, okay? And safe doesn't mean no crashes, okay? That stuff will happen. We'll just have to, unfortunately, learn from it. The issue is to learn from it as fast as we can, cooperatively with everybody together. Those are the fundamental things.
And Nat, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us here today. Really terrific information, and congratulations on what you're doing there at Uber.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Dr. K.
Yeah,
Happy to be able to spend some time with you too. It's been fun.
It's the most important topic. It really is. And thank you. And thank you for all your great work, Nat.
And thanks to our sponsor, the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol again is MOTO. More information, motoetf.com. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you go for your podcast. You can get your smart speaker to play us too. And you can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and please stay safe.
And stay safe during the Labor Day weekend and so on.
Please do, yes.
Yes, and don't misbehave too much on the roads, okay?